that fundamental concept you probably learned back in high school biology, how your body makes energy? Well, what if I told you it wasn't just a little bit off, but maybe completely wrong? Okay, let's get into this because we are about to explore a radical new idea that is challenging decades of textbook science. See, the story we've all been told is really neat, it's tidy, and it's very machine-like. But a growing pile of research suggests the reality inside our cells is something, well, something far more chaotic, a lot more powerful, and frankly, way more interesting. So first, let's do a quick refresher on the classic model, the one we all recognize. I want you to think of the mitochondrion, the powerhouse of the cell, as this tiny microscopic factory that's running a perfect, totally predictable assembly line. For decades, this has been the main theory. It's called the EPCR hypothesis, which is just a fancy acronym for the key steps: electron transport, proton pumping, chemiosmosis, and rotary synthesis. It paints this picture of a beautifully deterministic process, where every single part has its place, and every step follows the last one perfectly, just like a well-oiled machine. It basically breaks down into a few key stages. First, electrons get handed off down a fixed chain. Then, protons get pumped out across a membrane. Then, those protons flow back in through this one specific channel, and that flow of protons is what physically turns a tiny molecular motor that just cranks out ATP, which is the energy currency that powers pretty much everything you do. It's simple, it's elegant, it's orderly, but what if it's a little too simple? That's the exact question that researcher K.M. Manoj started asking. He published a paper back in 2017 where he basically said, you know what, for years, this whole explanation for how we make energy, it's called Mox-Foss, technically. It's never sat right with me. He found the official story just a bit too cumbersome and rigid for the messy, dynamic reality of actual biology. And that right there was the opening shot in what could be a revolution in how we understand our own bodies. So, if it's not a neat little assembly line, then what in the world is it? Well, Manoj proposed a totally new theory, one that actually embraces the chaos that's inherent to life itself. And this is where you can really see the difference. The old theory, it's all about order, structure, a determined flow. The new Merburn concept, it's the total opposite. Unordered, probabilistic, based on things that can just diffuse and float around. And maybe the most important part is the complete 180 it does on the role of something called diffusible reactive oxygen species, or DROS. You've probably heard of these as free radicals. The Merburn concept, which is short for mild, unrestricted burning, it just completely torches that factory analogy. Instead, it says that making energy is much more like a controlled fire, a super fast, radical-based chemical reaction that's just contained inside the mitochondrial membranes. And this quote just brilliantly illustrates the new idea. So forget the quaint little factory. Manoj argues the mitochondrion is way more like a biological nuclear reactor, a place that harnesses this immense power from a contained, probabilistic, and potentially volatile reaction. Just look at the schematic from the paper. It is not a neat little line, is it? All the parts are kind of scattered around. The theory says that instead of a fixed chain, energy gets transferred in these random, supercharged pockets of activity, what the paper calls delocalized high-potential hotspots. And it's all happening inside this chaotic reaction area called the MER zone. It really is a system of controlled chaos, not rigid order. Okay, and here it is. This is the most radical, maybe the most mind-blowing idea of all. For decades, we've all been taught that reactive oxygen species, those free radicals we just mentioned, are the bad guys. They're the damaging waste products of metabolism that cause aging and disease. But the Merburn concept flips this entire idea on its head. It argues they are not waste at all. In fact, they are the essential, mandatory messengers that actually make the energy transfer happen. Their creation isn't a bug in the system, it's the entire feature. So, a nuclear reactor instead of a factory, chaos instead of order, villains turning out to be heroes, this is all pretty fascinating stuff, right? But why should we actually care about this high-level debate in cell biology? Because the way our cells produce energy is the absolute bedrock of our health. This isn't just some tiny detail in a textbook. This is quite literally a matter of life and death. So let's pivot from the theory for a second and ask a really tough question. What are the human consequences when this powerhouse, whether you think it's a factory or a reactor, starts to fail? And the answer lies in a group of absolutely devastating conditions that are known collectively as mitochondrial diseases. To really understand this, a recent study from a pediatric clinic gives us a heartbreakingly clear picture. Researchers looked at the cases of 19 children, all of them with a genetically confirmed diagnosis that their cellular power plants were just not working right. The single most common clinical finding they found? A staggering 52.6%. More than half of these children suffered from something called hypotonia, which is a condition of severe muscle weakness, floppiness they call it. And that is a direct result of their muscles simply not getting the energy they need to work. And the impact hits the entire body. As you can see, beyond the muscle weakness, over a quarter of them had lactic acidosis, a dangerous buildup of acid in the body. More than 20% had seizures. For others, it meant developmental delays and even losing their vision. When the power goes out at the cellular level, the whole system just starts to shut down. And let's make this even more real, because these are not just numbers on a chart. Look at patient 3, diagnosed at just 2 days old, or patient 1, who had a mini stroke at only 6 years old, and patient 5, who is facing blindness at age 8. The failure of this fundamental biological process has absolutely devastating consequences for real children and their families. So let's bring these two threads of our story together. On one hand, we have this radical new theory of energy as a controlled burn, and on the other, the devastating reality of what happens when that fire goes out. There's this quote from the Merburn paper that I think just says it all. Maybe life isn't a perfect deterministic machine. Maybe it's something more dynamic, more resilient, but also more fragile, a carefully managed chaos that literally clawed its way out of the primordial soup. And that leaves us with a really profound question. If we stop trying to fix a broken machine and instead start trying to manage a fire, what does that mean for treating these awful mitochondrial diseases? What does it mean for understanding the process of aging itself? Reframing our most basic understanding of energy could be the first step toward a whole new chapter in medicine.